The reason we need populism and the need to get it formed up is that there's bigger and more crucial decisions coming down the road.
Steve Bannon did not drain the swamp while he worked in the White House. You may have noticed the former Goldman Sachs banker is still talking about it, railing against the elites and promising he will be a populist leader against capitalism now that he's out of government. He's also one of the only Trump insiders to directly respond to Eminem, telling a reporter he doesn't give an expletive, which Breitbart posted. Bannon clearly relishes being a villain to the left, and his message now appears to be, I am whatever you say I am, and if I wasn't, then why would I say I am? That, plus attacking Wall Street, where he used to work.
You guys have more common sense, more understanding of what we need to do, and more decency than the elites. And the first order of business is to undo all the damage of globalism, right? That allowed Silicon Valley and Wall Street and Hollywood and the imperial capital right here in Washington, D.C. If you think that the elites that got the world into the situation it is today are going to make the right judgments 20 years from now, you're sadly mistaken.
That attack also comes as another Trump cabinet member under fire for hiding up to $2 billion, not million, $2 billion during the Trump transition, raising a question of what populism even means. Some Democratic strategists say Trump's hypocrisy and failure to drain the swamp is actually an opportunity and to own real populism on the economy and health care, as Jeff Weaver is arguing in a new piece that's making the rounds about the real populist revolution. He says it's on the left. With me, the man who wrote that piece, Jeff Weaver, former senior advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders and other Democrats, as well as Perry Bacon, a political writer for 538. Jeff, how do you go from the frustration with the Trump team getting away everything from the private jets to the missing $2 billion I just showed? How do you get that over to what you're calling this revolution?
Well, look, Steve Bannon is a very skilled snake oil salesman, along with Donald Trump. You know, both of them pledged during the campaign they were going to help working people in this country and middle-income people. And what we have seen from this administration is an unrelenting attack on the financial and, frankly, the physical health with their attacks on the ACA of working class and middle class people across this country. You look at the administration, it is really a joke. George W. Bush would never have had the guts to pack so many Wall Street types and billionaires in his administration. What is going on here is really a travesty, and folks who are talking about the Trump hypocrisy are absolutely right. And Bannon is part of that hypocrisy, clearly.
And Perry, let me play for you what Donald Trump said today when asked about Steve Bannon. They have this dance. I mean, he seems to have a much more immediate big public profile than the typical departing advisor. Here was the president today.
Mr. President, do you approve of Steve Bannon's war on Mitch McConnell and the Republican establishment?
Well, Steve is very committed. He's a friend of mine, and he's very committed to getting things passed. We're not getting the job done. And I'm not going to blame myself, I'll be honest. They are not getting the job done.
As you see, Perry, it's hard for Donald Trump to answer a question about Steve Bannon without talking about himself. But what do you think of what's going on here?
I think that Steve Bannon, he left the White House. By the way, Steve Bannon helped pick most of the cabinet, so that his version of populism does include billionaire cabinet members. But I should note that I think that Steve Bannon left the White House and said, I'm going to support the Trump agenda from outside the White House. And I would argue the Trump agenda does include taking on Mitch McConnell, taking on Jeff Flake, taking on kind of the more establishment part of the Republican Party. And I think Steve Bannon is probably doing that in that role. Like, I would actually argue at this point, Steve Bannon is probably doing Donald Trump more good outside the White House than he did inside the White House, because Bannon was very ineffective in the White House itself.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's the comparison there is telling. He's less harmful when he has less power is another way to make the point. I want to turn from this. So this is sort of the abstract because, you know, Jeff Weaver writes an op-ed. Everyone forwards it and talks about it, Jeff. You know, you got that viral power like your old boss. I'm trying to get Jeff Weaver to smile, but it's hard.
Thank you. There you go.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
You have spent so much time focusing on your tax reform plan. The details are still coming out here, but it's clear that wealthy Americans are going to get a pretty hefty chunk of the benefits out of this bill. Are you open to shifting that through the course of negotiations? Are you open to giving more of that to the middle class?
Yeah, that's the entire discussion we're having about a fourth bracket on high-income earning individuals so that they don't get a big rate cut, that goes to middle-class taxpayers. That is something we're doing and looking at. The question is just how to set the numbers. We're waiting to see what the budget resolution looks like to see how those numbers work. So that is the key. And the president made it really clear to us. He basically said to us, I don't want wealthy income earners to get a big tax rate cut. We want that to go to middle income earners, and we agree with that. On the flip side, businesses, and remember, people own businesses. It's really important that we drop tax rates on businesses because businesses in America are being taxed at much, much higher tax rates compared to their foreign competitors, and we're losing in foreign competition as a result of it.
But you're assuming quite a bit of growth if you're making that assumption that those business tax cuts are going to help the middle class. That's new for you. You've always been previously a deficit.
You're missing me. I'm an old Jack Kemp supply sider, actually. So I'm a big believer in broadening the base and lowering the rates, and that will give us faster economic growth. Absolutely, no two ways about it. If you ask me that all tax cuts pay for themselves, no, that's not the case. Some do. It basically depends on how high the tax is, what's international competition look like, and what kind of tax are you talking about. But we know when we lower tax rates, that helps economic growth, and especially in the international area, where businesses are taxed on average at 22.5%, and we are taxing American businesses, big and small, between 35 and 40%.
No, they pay lower than that effectively, however.
Oh, a lot of businesses pay that effective top statutory. I was just with UPS, big, huge company, right? The brown trucks. Their effective tax rate is 34%. They compete against DHL, 24%. I was talking to Harley Davidson just the other day, a big Milwaukee company. Their effective tax rate's up in the mid-30s. They're competing against companies taxed at like 20%. So we're really putting our firms at a competitive disadvantage. But when you take loopholes away and lower rates, everybody pays the same. We think that's fair.
You said last week in a speech, if we squander this opportunity, we'll never come again. Some will say this is, you're defining life's work. If you can't pass tax reform, how long do you see yourself staying as Speaker of the House?
I took this job to do big policy things. I didn't take this job to be a caretaker. I didn't take this job to be a beer and be here and have some big title. I took this job to do things. I took this job to improve people's lives, to pass the principles and the policies that I've spent my adult life working on. And so, yeah, this is one of those big issues. It's not just me, it's us, we, here in Congress. We ran on doing this. The president ran on doing this. So we've got a pretty big commitment to keep. And the great thing about keeping this commitment is everybody benefits. That's why, among other reasons, I took this job as Speaker of the House.
Do you risk losing the majority if you can't do this? What's your message?
I just don't get into the political speculation of if we do this, if we don't do this. Look, I think we need to keep our word.
But isn't that the underlying message to your members that you've been sending? Hey, you might have a small problem here, but if you don't do this big thing, there's going to be major consequences.
We want to show that there's a reason for us being in the majority. And the reason for us being in the majority is we're going to help grow the economy. We're going to help give people tax breaks. We're going to help simplify the tax system. We're going to grow the economy. If we don't do that, then that doesn't look very good. And more importantly, we ran on doing this. We ran House, Senate, President Trump on overhauling the tax code and cutting taxes for middle-class taxpayers. And so we got to make good on that commitment.
The president has regularly engaged in disputes with various members, Bob Corker, the most recent Ben Sasse, over the First Amendment. Is that helpful to your agenda?
It's what he does. We've kind of learned to live with it. He and I have had, well, not on this particular issue, but we've had our engagements in the past too. I don't think what I'm trying to get our members to do is just focus on doing our jobs. We're here elected to represent our constituents, to advance our principles, pass solutions. That's what we're focused on. And I try to get members just not to get distracted by these things.
Did you ever imagine that Washington would be the way that it is now under President Trump?
I think the country's pretty darn polarized. I think one of the reasons why it's polarized is because the economy has been pretty darn flat for a long time, and there's a lot of anxiety in America. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I'm so focused on this agenda, because I think it will give relief to this anxiety, because it will give people more confidence in their future.
Is the president helping?
Yeah, he's crisscrossing the country helping us with tax reform. Absolutely, he's helping us with tax reform. Do I wish he would tweet less? Of course I do. He knows that, but I don't think that's something out of my control, and I don't think that's something that's going to change. But is he going around and helping us sell tax reform? Is he connecting with people? Did this president, as a Republican, win Wisconsin for the first time since '84 in Pennsylvania?
Did he do that by
Yeah.
uniting or dividing?
You take a look at where I come from, he united people. He brought people into our party, voting for a Republican president, voting for a hotly contested U.S. Senate race. And these are Democrats that felt like they were overshadowed. We used to call them Reagan Democrats, now they're Trump Democrats. So yeah, he did actually grow and bring to the party, and he put together a pretty darn impressive vote coalition. So yeah, I think he did unify on that front.
Since the president was elected, you have said you make it known to him you don't want him to tweet, but you've also, you've defended his actions by saying he's new at this, he'll get used to it. You didn't go after him by name after Charlottesville. But during the campaign, you said, in the wake of the Access Hollywood tape that was released, that you would never defend Donald Trump, not now and in the future. And I've heard from some critics of you who they are Republicans, and they don't necessarily recognize the Republican Party under Trump, and they're disappointed in you.
Well, that's fine. They can be that however they want. I think the best thing I can do as Speaker of the House is help us pass an agenda that improves people's lives. We have an agenda that we all agree on. We have unified government. I think it's really important to make this unified government work. Imagine if we decided just to have some internal food fight and get nothing done for the country. How does that help people get a job? How does that help people get more take-home pay? How does that help relieve the insecurity that people have in this country who are living paycheck to paycheck? It doesn't. So if we want to play some DC game of fighting each other and get nothing done, maybe that would satisfy a few people. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm elected to defend the Constitution, to represent people in Wisconsin, to help run Congress, to improve people's lives. And you do that by getting things done. And in this unified government we have a tremendous opportunity to get big, good things done. That, to me, is the most important thing I can contribute to.
You mentioned an internal food fight and your majority, which is a nice segue into my question about Steve Bannon, who is, quite frankly, picking a food fight with a lot of your incumbents, both in the Senate and in the House. Are you afraid of what Steve Bannon might do to your majority?
No, I'm not afraid of it. I think we're going to be fine if we just do our work and get our jobs done and pass our policies. I think
Is he helping the Republican Party?
Yeah, I don't think it's helpful to have internal fights. I don't think it's helpful to be going after fellow Republicans. I think what's most helpful is if we all unify around our common goals, principles, and purposes and get an agenda passed. So, yeah, I don't think having these internecine fights are helpful. But at the same time, I don't think it's really going to deter us from doing what we said we would do and doing what we're working on right now.
Are the messages that Steve Bannon is sending to the Republican base helpful for the country?
To be honest with you, I'm not paying that close attention to it. I'm a little busy with a day job, so I don't even really know what you mean when you say the messages. I'm making sure that we get our budget passed.
He works with
sure
Breitbart. They've written a lot of stories, going after you.
I have three stories in my life: death, taxes, and attacks from Breitbart. So I'm just so used to that stuff that, to be honest with you, in this job, you just don't really spend time thinking about or worrying about things outside of your control like that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
Democrats have proposed that we have a public option, that we have risk corridors, and that we fund the CSRs. And we've made propositions. The problem is the Republicans don't want to do anything to help it in the House, so our bills don't get scheduled for a vote, a markup, or a hearing. Now, on the Senate side, Patty Murray and Lamar Alexander have tried to work together to provide a solution. The Senate Democrats want to do that, and there's Lamar Alexander willing to do it, but they've not gotten anywhere, and Trump's executive order probably cuts the legs out from under them, and it'll be difficult to get anything done. But I think John Kasich is running against Congress. He's running for president. He'd certainly be a better president than than Donald Trump, but that's not the issue.
So looking at the calendar here, as you know, the House has less than 30 days left in the session this year. There's a lot on the to-do list. You've got health reform, tax reform, Iran, DACA, the debt ceiling, and the decline to fund the government, a deadline rather to fund the government. I mean, that's just the big stuff. What is the focal point for Democrats right now? Is there any consensus?
Well, we want to try to help working people. We want to see that laws are in place that make America more just and to give working people opportunities to get college education, to be able to afford their homes, and to get good health insurance and continue to support the Affordable Care Act. The problem is we are in the minority, and the Republicans control the agenda. At the end, when they need votes and the Freedom Party falls off from the Republican coalition, which will happen on the debt ceiling and may happen on tax reform, then Leader Pelosi can have some influence in negotiating a final deal that may get passed that will need Democrat votes as well as Republicans. The Republicans have a split among themselves between the Freedom Party, which is the most conservative, who I think about 70 of them voted not to help with funding for Puerto Rico. That was just cruel and inhuman. And there were Texans who voted for Texas relief, but didn't vote for Puerto Rican relief. Some of them didn't even vote for Texas relief. But those folks don't work with the rest of the Republicans, and they'll need Democratic votes to get anything done. And that's at the end, when it comes to crunch time, then the Democrats can have some say in policy that will be good.
I want to ask you, sir, about another item on your personal to-do list. I know you've said that you are planning to introduce impeachment articles against the president in the coming weeks. What specifically do you think the president has done that warrants impeachment?
Well, the president, it starts with James Comey and his firing, and he said to the Russians, I've gotten rid of that nut job, and told Lester Holt I fired him because I said to myself, this guy's not working with me on Russia, and I need to stop this, basically. That's obstruction of justice, and there's quite a bit. We've drawn an article that lays out all the facts and shows how it is. Then there's the emoluments clause, and he continues to violate those. There's both an international emoluments clause where you're not supposed to take money from a foreign government without first coming to Congress, and he's done it at Trump Hotel, he's done it at Trump World Tower, Trump International Tower, Trump Hotel, Trump everything. And there's a domestic emoluments clause about getting monies over and beyond your salary being forbidden. And he gets monies for the Secret Service and everybody else that goes to Mar-a-Lago and his golf courses, and that comes into the hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. So there are violations continuously going on. There's abuses of the press, which is a series of actions, a pattern of behavior, starting back, I guess, with Megyn Kelly in the debates and how he attacked her, and then went on with Morning Joe and their hosts. But most lately, when he questioned NBC even having a license, which of course he can't revoke, but he threatened it. He seems to call it the fake news, and the news is the enemy of the American people. These type of actions are violative of his oath to uphold the Constitution and the First Amendment, freedom of the press. And then you've got actions on the judiciary, with Arpaio, with so-called judges, with Judge Curio in California. An anarchist first goes, an authoritarian first goes against the press and the judiciary, and that's what this man has done, and it puts the United States in a vulnerable position.
So I should think you have explained your reasoning to your colleagues, but I know that just a few days ago on Twitter, you wrote that you were still seeking co-sponsors, especially judiciary members, for your impeachment articles. What kind of support have you received from, first, other Democrats, and is there any interest whatsoever from Republicans?
Well, we've gotten some people who've committed to support our resolution. We want to get a few more. We don't want to be like the previous resolution that was introduced in July, that was introduced by one member by himself. Not that William Tell and the Lone Ranger aren't right sometimes, but it's best in Congress to have some support and not be the Lone Ranger. Al Green did not introduce this resolution yet, but he made a presentation on the floor. We have some judiciary members on board, others working with us to try to get more judiciary members. That's where it would have to be initiated. So it's a slow process, but basically we've got the resolution drawn, but we still need more sponsors. We'd like to have 10 when we introduce it, 7 or 8 or 10.
I'm curious, have any Republicans said to you privately, look, the timing not quite yet, but if the president continues on this same trajectory, okay, then we will support you?
I have one Republican that just said he is looking at it, he's considering it. I have other Republicans, just like Senator Bob Corker suggested, who have told me on a constant basis that they know this man is not balanced, he is not capable of continuing to lead us, including Freedom Party people who said, I don't know how long we can stand this. And they privately will tell you, and by their words and by their expressions, that they would like to see an end to the Trump administration and don't approve of what he's doing. But the Republican base is still supportive of Trump. That's who's strong in their primaries, and politically they can't come out and say it. But you look at people like Ileana Ros-Lehtinen in Florida, who's announced she's not running for re-election. She criticizes him regularly, saying how the change in insurance will run up more people without insurance in her district, as it will mine. His executive orders will devastate the ACA, but will devastate really Trump people. Middle class and lower income people will pay more and probably go uninsured. And when they do get insurance in these associations, they'll have skimpy policies. And when it comes time when they're sick, they'll find out the policies don't cover them. So there are problems there. And you see Bob Corker, he's not running for re-election. And he's become free to criticize, and not just criticize, but to speak the truth about this president who is incapable of taking action based on rational thought and work, but rather acting like a child and acting in a tempestuous way about anything that President Obama did and trying to destroy it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
Joining us now is John McLaughlin. He's the former acting director of the CIA and an MSNBC national security analyst. John, thank you for joining me. I want to play you something that Leon Panetta said to MTP Daily today about how, in doing this, Donald Trump has rolled a grenade into the room. Hear it in Leon Panetta's words.
The president has kind of rolled the grenade in the room, had it go off without having a strategy as to where we're going. The reality is that we now have a decertification of this agreement and that they're not in compliance when they are, in fact, in compliance. We're out there alone without our allies. We've broken our word. And the bottom line here is we're throwing this whole mess to Congress, which doesn't have a very good record of trying to deal with anything, much less the situation in Iran. It's going to create a tremendous amount of confusion in a world that's already very dangerous.
John, I mean, to just put a finer point on that, Congress can't get the easy things done. I'm not sure they could successfully name a post office these days. And we have a situation where the president and the administration are coming out and saying our allies are actually supportive of the president on this, which is just absolutely not true, particularly the allies involved in this deal. And then we have the abrogation of a deal where the verifying entity, the International Atomic Energy Agency, continues to verify that Iran's doing the right thing, and we're still decertifying. This thing is fraught with problems.
No, absolutely, Ali. The International Atomic Energy Agency has certified compliance with this deal on 8 separate occasions since it was inaugurated. And Leon Panetta has this exactly right. In fact, I would go even maybe a step further and say that I think this is one of the most damaging decisions that Donald Trump has made since becoming president, because of the scope and the breadth of the impact that it will have, separating us from allies, strengthening hardliners in Iran, pushing our allies closer into positions with Russia and China, at the same time also creating conditions that will make it much more difficult, should we go into negotiations with North Korea, to bring them along with any credibility on anything we agree on. So across the board, and you know, I think a thought I was having tonight is that I suspect most of his close advisors, Secretary of Defense and so forth, H.R. McMaster, I suspect they generally see it about the same way that I just described. And so what we saw from Donald Trump today is the best they can manage with him. And I'm not taking, I wouldn't take a back seat to anyone when it comes to concern and suspicion about Iran.
Absolutely.
I held that throughout my career. But no reason to, as Leon said, throw a grenade into the room over one part of this arrangement with them that's generally working, and it's the most important part of the arrangement, the nuclear arrangement.
Right, and that's what the 2 years of negotiations were designed to do. One of the things that the Washington Post is talking about is that Senator Bob Corker is saying that Donald Trump is publicly castrating, that's a bad one to get wrong, publicly castrating Rex Tillerson. Let me just tell you what it says here. As Corker sees it, the biggest problem is that Trump is neutering his own chief diplomat
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, and thereby inviting binary situations in which the United States will have to choose between war and a North Korea or Iran capable of threatening the United States with nuclear weapons. Corker says you cannot publicly castrate your own Secretary of State without giving yourself that binary choice. Let me ask you this, John. This was work that was done by chief diplomats around the world. Federica Mogherini from the European Union, Sergei Lavrov, Javad Zarif from Iran, Senator John Kerry, Secretary of State John Kerry from the United States, working really hard for 2 years, people who had different positions on all sorts of things. And now we have a Secretary of State who really can't pull up to the table and speak with the authority of the American government.
No, I think that's right. And one of the tragedies of what we see going on now is that diplomacy generally, as one of the tools in the foreign policy toolkit, has been dramatically weakened, not only by the things that you mentioned, but by the, in a way, the decimation of the State Department, which during my career I always regarded as one of the jewels in the crown of American security. And we've heard that from Secretary Mattis as well. Plus, on the diplomatic front, you know, what we see happening here in this speech today is America first colliding with the necessity in the world today of coalition with allies and cooperation with allies to get important things done. So we've damaged our credibility here with people that we need to accomplish great things in the world, because it's very hard for the United States to just muscle through on its own these days in a complex world. Yep. And this agreement was one in which, as your previous guest pointed out, we had managed to bring the world together on one of the most controversial problems of our age. This is probably, I would say, the most important step that we've been able to take in years in limiting the most dangerous weapons we have in the world.
Yeah, it was. There were a lot of people at the time who didn't think it was a great deal. They thought it was the deal that we could achieve. John, thanks very much for joining us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
Joining me now is Senator Al Franken, a Democrat from Minnesota. Sir, thank you much for being here tonight. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure to be on your premiere show. I had understood I was going to be on, I was going to kind of be your sidekick, and I was going to be on every week, but was told that just...
We only invited you for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
although we are happy to have you back whenever you want.
Okay, it's very different than what I understood.
I'm sorry that we just played something from, I think you used to want that job at one point, the Weekend Update.
Yeah, I wanted. That's right, you read the book.
I did read your
book. I never got the anchors. But that was fine. That's fine. I'm senator, and I'm happy here. Very happy here.
But you want to be co-host of KCDC?
I was kind of well. It's a Sunday night. Perfect. You know, have to be back in Washington on Monday. This could have been a good transition to getting back to work.
All right. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Let's talk about your actual day job, healthcare. We were talking earlier with Senator Susan Collins about what may or may not happen with the bipartisan negotiations that have been going on with Patty Murray and Lamar Alexander in the Health Committee.
The ranking and chair of the Health Committee, which Susan is on, which I'm on. And
where do those negotiations stand right now? I mean, it seems like Republican leaders basically shut them down to try to take another shot at repealing.
To do Graham Cassidy.
Exactly.
Yeah, we had these great bipartisan hearings in the Health Committee where the first hearing we had 5 state insurance commissioners, 3 from Republican states, 2 from Democratic states. They all agreed, got to continue the cost-sharing reduction payments. Got to do that. 2 days later, the second hearing, 5 governors, 3 from Republican states, 2 from Democratic states, all agreed. Got to continue the cost-sharing reduction payments. Doesn't make any sense not to, because actually, when it would drive insurance premiums up 20%. So the whole point of this thing was to get the exchanges on more secure footing. People want the premiums to go down.
Right.
Hang on. In addition, it would increase the deficit by $194 billion, according to CBO.
Because the government would have to pay more subsidies.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, makes no sense whatsoever. Everyone knows that. And what the president is doing here is sabotage.
But what's the realistic possibility of something passing the Congress? I mean, Republicans were complaining Democrats were basically drawing too hard a line and asking for too much.
Well, first of all, I think if we just said continue the cost-sharing reduction payments, that would be fine. I think if there's a negotiation, I know that Lamar Alexander talks about giving states flexibility. We're fine with that, as long as it doesn't unravel the protections that people with pre-existing conditions have in terms of the essential health benefits.
Let's switch topics a little bit. I want to show you something that somewhat surprisingly was on our Sunday morning talk shows this morning. This is Rex Tillerson talking to Jake Tapper about the Iran deal.
Okay.
You have a cattle ranch. You don't want to say anything about the senator suggesting you've been gelded before the world, and that's not anything that bothers you?
I checked. I'm fully intact.
That was his response to Bob Corker saying that effectively Rex Tillerson has been castrated here. What do you think are the implications of the infighting and those kinds of discussions among Republicans, among the Trump foreign policy team for the country?
It does seem that the adults and the foreign policy team seems to be those people. I'm talking about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State. They have been saying that Iran is in compliance and that pulling out of this deal is it's bad for the United States in so many different ways. Our European allies, Russia, China, are not going to pull out. So it'll just leave us isolated. It undercuts our leadership in the world. And boy, with North Korea, this doesn't help. What kind of message does that send? That we abrogate every treaty that we sign, whether it's Paris or this or every agreement? This is just undermines our nation as a leader. And by the way, this was a good deal. It means that Iran will not get a nuclear weapon. Imagine where we would be on those other issues if Iran had gone to a nuclear weapon.
Added to the list of foreign policy crises. So we have spent a lot of time on the air talking about Republicans and their infighting, but your own party, the Democrats, have got their fair share of back and forth. You were somebody who at one point, you had your finger on the progressive base of the party. I mean, you founded Air America and wrote a book about Rush Limbaugh, and now in this book you're saying, hey, I'm actually kind of friends with some Republicans. Is that something that, the Democratic base is so angry right now?
I think they know that to get things done here, you have to work together, especially if you're in the minority.
Do they in Trump's Washington? I mean, it seems like the tolerance, the progressive base of the party that is going to hold whoever the nominee is in 2020. I haven't asked you yet if you're running in 2020. I know you said no in your last interview.
Yeah.
Absolutely ruling it out, never going to do it.
I don't want to be president.
Okay, so then your advice to whoever is the nominee in 2020, how do they handle a base that's so angry that they won't tolerate being friends with a Republican?
When I go back to Minnesota, I was in Minnesota all this week. I didn't hear a lot of that. Don't talk to the Republicans. I heard a lot of, please get things done. Please get things done in a way. I mean, they didn't like what the Republicans are doing on health care. They hated Trump care. I'm co-chair of the Rural Health Caucus. I go all around Minnesota. I go to rural hospitals. People hated Trump care. It had like 17% approval. They want us to work together, get things done for them. I know that Speaker Ryan said that, but he's actually right about that one thing.
Just that one thing?
That one thing. When he was talking about tax reform, that's all about tax cuts for people at the top. That's what that is. It's another Republican trickle-down thing, and that's why we really should be doing things through regular order. Yeah. That's what John McCain said. And that's what we should have been doing in the Health Committee and in the Finance Committee on health care. And do you know that the first hearing that we had this Congress in the Health Committee was exactly on shoring up
The
exchanges.
Yep.
And that was in early January before the president was sworn in.
Yeah. Tom Steyer, billionaire donor, has essentially said that the litmus test for Democratic candidates, and he's considering running against Dianne Feinstein in California in a primary, should be, are you willing to say the president should be impeached? So do you think the president should be impeached?
I think we have to wait until what Bob Mueller comes up with. I think we have a process in place. I think Tom Steyer is a great guy, but I don't agree with him on this one. I think that Bob Mueller is in the right position. I think he's going to do this the right way. I don't think you should impeach someone for, as much as I don't approve of the way the president has been doing his job or the way he acts outside the norms of a president or as a human being. I still think that we need to do this the right way. I don't think the American people will accept it, and I'm agnostic on this until we find out exactly whether the president broke the law, and I think Bob Mueller will tell us, and whether it rises to the high crimes and misdemeanors.
We have to go, but quick, one-word answer. The president has not attacked you yet, I don't think, that I could find, but if he had to give you a nickname, Little Marco, Little Bob Corker, what would his nickname for you be?
Giant of the Senate.
It's got to be one word. That's
Giant.
4 words. Giant Al Franken.
Giant.
There you
Just
go.
Giant. Everyone would know who he was talking about.
Okay. I see. Al Franken, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight.
Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
the
You do have an
show.
open invitation to come back anytime.
Thank
We
you.
really
Thank you
appreciate
very
having you.
much. Thanks.
Senator Al Franken, thanks so much.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
That's exactly right. Of course, President Trump is very critical of President Obama for overusing executive power, expanding the definition of what a president can really do, and yet he's had to use some of that himself. He, like President Obama, is very frustrated with Congress. As you point out, the difference is this is the beginning of his presidency, and also with a Congress of his own party. So that frustration is rather stark, that he's turned to his executive power to do that. On the other hand, what his White House would tell you is he's using executive power to undo what were overly expansive executive power actions by his predecessor. He was undoing the DACA program. He's undoing some of the health care things that the previous president had done using executive authority, and the Iran deal. So far, he hasn't actually, completely canceled all of those things, but he's taken action toward that end.
Yeah. Let's talk about an article in Vanity Fair. It was titled, "I Hate Everyone in the White House. Trump seethes as advisors fear the president is unraveling." Peter, based on what you're seeing, what you're hearing as you cover the White House, is there any truth to that?
Well, look, this is a White House that is full of drama and full of, anger and frustration and turmoil and rivalries and a constant sense of turmoil. It's a turbulent place. And you see a president who's unhappy with his first few months in office, unhappy with Congress, unhappy with some of the advisors he's brought in. You see a team around him that has felt very beset, either by a president who, doesn't follow the script, or by each other in the various rivalries for power, influence, and position. Some of that has gotten better under John Kelly, the new chief of staff. He's kind of put a clamp down on some of the more chaotic elements of the presidency that we saw in the first few months. But there's still a real undercurrent of discontent in this White House, both on the part of the president and the people around him.
Look, you mentioned Kelly. He had to make a surprise appearance at a press briefing this week. Let's take a listen to some of what he said.
Although I read it all the time, pretty consistently, I'm not quitting today. I don't believe, and I just talked to the president, I don't think I'm being fired today. And I am not so frustrated in this job that I'm thinking of leaving. I would tell you, this is the hardest job I've ever had. This is, in my view, the most important job I ever had.
I mean, what does this say to you? How unusual is this to hear a White House chief of staff feeling the need to make these kinds of remarks in the first place?
Well, this is the second time we've had a major figure in this administration come out in the course of 2 weeks to say, no, I'm not resigning. Remember, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson did the same thing just about a week earlier. And you're right, it is extraordinary. And listen to what he said. Listen to the modifier. He said, I'm not so frustrated that I'm going to leave. He didn't say that he wasn't frustrated. He just said, I'm not so frustrated that I'm going to leave. Of course, it's a tough job. It's a tough job under any circumstance. This is a president who doesn't make it particularly easy by sort of, launching off new crusades, various jihads, various campaigns via Twitter on any given morning. Certainly, John Kelly spent one of his days, for instance, last week calming down the governor of Puerto Rico after the president has seemed to suggest that he might pull federal resources out at some point soon after that hurricane that they've been suffering. So you, as a chief of staff, as any advisor in this White House knows, you're not going to be able to control President Trump. He is who he is. He does what he does. He believes that's how he got to the White House in the first place, and he doesn't need people to tell him what to do. So the best you can do as a staffer in that circumstances is manage the situation and keep things under control as best you can.
Well, part of the way he got to the White House, though, was, of course, being very much part of the American culture. And you write another article this week. It's got the headline for Trump, the reality show has never ended. That refers first to the president's feud with Republican Senator Bob Corker, and it reads, quote, he called out the offending senator for being short and sounding like a fool. He challenged the Secretary of State to an IQ contest and insisted he would win. He celebrated the downfall of a critic who was suspended from her job, and his first wife and third wife waged a public war of words over who was really his first lady. Are there elements of this that are strategic, or is this just more example of internal frustrations that the public gets to see and hear?
Well, look, this is a president who spent 14 years, of course, hosting a reality television show. What he understands is how to keep the storylines fresh, how to keep the audience coming back for more. He's a showman in some ways, and I think that part of what he does is to kind of keep people on edge. There's always this sort of reality show element to his White House. Who might be in, who might be out, who might be voted off the island next.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
More top Republicans are slamming Donald Trump. Senator Bob Corker made waves for confronting Trump after announcing he would not seek re-election. But a leading conservative notes Corker's new courage is undercut by the way he backed Trump during the campaign when it mattered most.
I have been repulsed by those who try to direct the electoral process in a certain direction, say, well, no matter what people do, we're going to cause this to happen at the convention. To me, that's inappropriate. At the same time, I've planned to support our nominee.
That nominee being Donald Trump. But in a blistering new column, conservative George Will calls out Corker and other Republicans who are speaking out now. Will has strong credentials here. He left the GOP over Trump and was clearer than these other folks coming about nowadays. George Will was clear in warning voters about Trump before Election Day.
After Trump went after the Mexican judge from northern Indiana, then Paul Ryan endorsed him. And I decided that, in fact, this is not my party anymore.
Can the Republican Party withstand Trump actually being their standard bearer?
No. Well, there'll still be a husk of the Republican Party. He has an advantage on me because he can say everything he knows about any subject in 140 characters, and I can't.
In this new piece, George Will laments Mike Pence becoming a, quote, leashed poodle too sycophantic to recognize his degradations from Trump, and writes Pence is a reminder that no one can have sustained transactions with Trump without becoming too soiled for subsequent scrubbing. Those Republicans who only now warn about Trump after he won and is in charge bring to mind the mythology of the owl of Minerva. You know, some say the owl flies to warn against getting lost in the forest when it gets dark, but because the owl only flies at dusk, when you see her, you know darkness is coming, but it is too late to save yourself. With me now is George Will, who wrote that column. George, are we like the owl when we hear from these Republicans? Did they act too late, and what were you trying to achieve in this new piece?
Well, they did act too late. The president, remember, before he was president, said it's not called the Conservative Party. It's the Republican Party, meaning a not conservative party in his judgment. He has trafficked with members of the alt-right. They are honestly labeled. They are an alternative to conservatism. An alternative to conservatism understood as limited government founded with reference to the founders' doctrine of natural rights. The alt-right with which Mr. Trump is flirting and Mr. Bannon is actively embracing says that, in fact, the tribalism to which we as human beings are subject to temptation should not be
for putting out. You can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.